You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God here.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you magnificent son of a bitch.
Frankie, for our listeners who don't know this, Frankie and I recorded multiple episodes today, and for some reason, Frank has made a wardrobe change in each one. I think Frank's like the Diana Ross of co-hosts of podcasts. He wants to look good for me every time. He just keeps switching up.
You little bastard. You are the one who typically does, I changed my shirt. I got a different look. Like
Frank, you dandy. So we want to talk today about the CEO of Chick-fil-A. I am just going to say before anything, because Frank's going to do most of the talking because he did the research on this one. I am just going to say that every time I go through a drive-through with Chick-fil-A, they are very pleasant, very nice, and they almost always compliment something. And I'm interested to hear if your boy brought this up, but they will say things like, I love your truck, or that's a cool hat, or they will say something to IJ. And I find that very unique about Chick-fil-A when it comes to the world of fast food. That's all I'm going to say. That's my Chick-fil-A story, other than I eat a lot more of it than Frank.
Yep. And if you listen to the last episode, we were going to go down this road and we ended up going into something completely different. But this is, I went to a conference, and at that conference, I saw many, many people speak. And we were thinking about doing a whole hour-long episode on the 3 billionaires that I saw speak, but instead we're going to just do the one. He was the CEO. He's now the chairman of the board. He's gotten older. He's 70 years old. And his name is Daniel Truett Cathy, or Dan T. Cathy, or just Dan Cathy. He's a little 70-year-old guy. And what's cool about him, and I talked about this in the last show, but I think to set him up right, he's a second-generation guy. So his dad started off with just a little kitchen. And what day of the week is Chick-fil-A closed?
Sunday.
Why?
Because he is a very religious guy. That's where people are supposed to be at church on Sundays.
So that is what everybody believes, because they're a Christian-based organization for sure. He made a couple of jokes about Jesuits and basically other Catholic denominations that are not Christian, but they're Christians. But do you know the real reason? Because that is not it. Why they close on Sundays?
Obviously, I don't. I just gave you an answer, and you're telling me I'm wrong.
It's so fun for Ian to not be correct with everything.
You're just trying to shame me. Normally, you say I'm going to check you in the editor's notes, and you don't do anything after.
Not true. I do incredible half-assed internet research. So they opened their first shop in like 1947. It was just a kitchen, right? It was just like an old school kitchen. It was real close to the Varsity in Atlanta. The Varsity's been there forever. If you've ever driven through Atlanta, and you know where the Varsity is, it's like on 85. It's on the right-hand side if you're heading north. And
it's Georgia Tech's campus.
Yeah, it's staple. Been there 100 years. So they opened on a Tuesday, and they were both talking. The dad and his brother are the ones who started it. And the dad asked the brother, he goes, I just don't like doing dishes on Sunday. Everybody goes to church, and then everybody goes out and does other things and has fun. Like, doing dishes I don't love, but I really don't want to do them on Sunday. So they were open for 5 days. Like, should we open? And they're like, let's just keep it closed. So literally after 5 days in business, they closed for the first time in 1947. And they've never opened on a Sunday since. Now, you talked about something that is really unique about Chick-fil-A. I said this earlier today, but I'll say it again. Chick-fil-A and American Express are the two companies that I have yet to have a bad customer service experience with. I'm not a regular goer of Chick-fil-A. I think Ian and his son eat it a lot more than us, but at the moment at least. But when I've gone into Chick-fil-A, I've always been struck by how incredible the people are. So Ian, talk a little bit about, you already said a little bit about customer service, but what's it like for you and IJ when you guys go there? Like, what do you love about the whole environment? And I'll tell you what he said about his hiring process.
You know what's interesting? They are innovative when it comes to like even just drive-through stuff. I can remember 10 years ago when I would go, the one in Reston near our corporate office used to always have this long drive-through. And they were the first place I can ever remember where they would send employees out in the parking lot with iPads and start taking your order ahead of time. Because, the traditional route was you waited in a long line, and when you got to the speaker, that's when you ordered. And so Chick-fil-A figured out, why don't we start taking people's orders and getting their food ready 10 cars behind? And then that led to, they were one of the first ones innovating with mobile apps. They've always struck me as they would add enough staff to make sure that you got your food quickly. And there's only a few restaurants like this that I've ever found, great American restaurants, which I know you love. Every restaurant you go into, and you might agree with this or disagree, every restaurant you go into with great American restaurant, it feels like the exact same experience no matter who waits on you.
Yep.
Someone walks you to your seat, they smile, they ask you a few questions, they sit you down, they get you your drink right away. Someone comes up, they always hit the specials, they ask a few questions, they turn tables really fast, but it's like you just know they hire well and they train well. And I feel it's the same way with Chick-fil-A. You almost never get someone rude. Now take, like, Frank, you ever stop on you're on a long ride, you stop at a Burger King or a Popeyes or like kind of a lower end, fast food. They treat you like they're always rude, grumpy as hell. I'm like, man, I just want a Whopper. You get the wrong stuff on it. But even when they're doing that, they're rude as hell. I just never feel that way with Chick-fil-A. You feel like they always hire a certain kind of person who's always incredibly polite to you, and they go out of their way to try to make the experience really great. It almost reminds me of like Nordstrom's in the 90s, when everyone would be blown away by going to Nordstrom's because everyone was so nice to you. I no longer care about such things or shop at Nordstrom, but it kind of felt like that to me, and it was a fast food restaurant.
So here's his philosophy on customer service. Customer service in the front of the counter is the same as the way you treat the customer behind the counter. So the reason that he said that is, like, they had somebody very early on that was an alcoholic that should have been fired. He was drinking on the job. And the old man started off by just getting behind the guy, helping him, supporting him, not firing him, and having that person eventually go to AA and kind of be restored. And he was with the company until he died, 50 years later. And that's important to them. So there's a familial quality to it, and it started really small. They lead with grace. These are religious folk. They think grace is critically important, which it is in many things, but it permeates from management on down. He said this, which I think is hysterical. He goes, it is. So let's go through talent selection.
When they go through their interview process, is he asking questions around religion?
He did not answer that question, but
I've always wondered that, because that's illegal.
So here's what he talked about. I'm going to answer that in a second. Here's how they hire. Based on their makeup of the person is critical. They go into competence, character, and commitment. The 3 C's. Like, are you competent? Do you have good character? And are you committed to this job? I'll talk about the deal structure in a minute. And this is the reason why, like, Shaq owned, I don't know, like 75 Papa John's. Like, inside of the Chick-fil-A program, you can either own 1 and sometimes 2 stores, but that's where they cap it, and you can't own more. And they want you to be like an owner operator, which I'll get to in a minute.
Sure.
He joked that it's harder to get a job at Chick-fil-A than it is with the CIA.
So they do background checks for fast food people.
Incredibly vigorous. He goes, if you lie, we will catch you. And not only will we catch you, we will never hire you. He goes, if you have something in your past, and many people do, be honest about it, because we'll catch you. And I would rather a person who's flawed than a person who lies.
Love that.
It's incredible.
Love that.
So Tony asked him, he goes, this is a live interview I watched. He goes, so what are
they
you
sitting at it? Like, paint the picture. Is Tony sitting on a couch talking to him up in front of everyone?
So there was Tony on one side, and there was 3 empty chairs. And they brought out the woman from Cauliflower first. They brought out this guy second, and then they brought out the CEO, the former CEO, the person who sold out of Lululemon for billions. He was third. And then at the end, they kind of did a brainstorming session, is where they asked themselves questions. And my biggest takeaway from him came out during that session, which I think is fascinating. So Tony asked him, what do you do better than anybody else? And he says, the relationships we have with the restaurant operators we do better than anybody else in the business. And he goes, let me give you kind of an overview of this. Vigorous training. The franchisee or the owner operator, it's not really a franchise. Guess how much money that the person, like if you want to buy a Chick-fil-A, how much do you have to come up with out of pocket, Ian?
$1 million.
You, as the person buying in, come up with $10,000. That's it.
That's it.
They come up with the rest.
So I don't understand that. How does that help with commitment if you have no skin in the game?
So I think what they do is they hire people. They don't go after celebrities that own 100 of these things like Papa John's or Domino's or Subways. What they do is they want someone who's got 10 grand, who's worked hard to save it and values the opportunity. Guess what the annually, I'll get this.
These aren't
franchises.
That's fascinating. These really aren't operators. These are employees.
These are owners.
All you can do is put $10,000 in owning a business, so to speak, and they're putting up the rest. You're an employee. It's like kind of like giving a 30-year mortgage out. They know you're going to be there a long time.
So let's go into that. Annual sales, their average store. So this is their average store, and they have 4,000 stores. Annually, what would you guess they make in annual sales?
I have no idea.
Just throw a number at it.
Annual sales in one store, given day, 10 million, 15 million.
You crushed it. 9.2.
Okay.
9.2 million. To put this in perspective for you, like when I worked at the Outback, but it was in the 90s, it was 25, 30 years ago, like 4 million a year for a high, back then it was a high ticket fast food place. Like they are so efficient. 9.2 million. Like you can't go there and there not be a lot.
Incredible, because they're not big stores.
That's it. $10,000 is the down payment.
That's almost all drive-through these days. Almost no.
I'm going to get to that statistic in a second. It's fascinating. So guess what the average operator, the store operator, makes annually?
10 million in revenue. How much do they make? 8%, 7%.
So 8% of 9 million is 720 grand. You're pretty close. 600,000.
Okay.
But if you're only putting in 10,000, that's a damn good return.
That's incredible.
Right. But I don't think, like I was thinking about this, like, can I go up to him? Can I go buy one for 10 grand? I'll give him 20 grand right now. I got it in my pocket. But like, I don't think they're going to let people like us do it.
They don't want you to do it because you would try to outsource everything, and they're looking for culture stewards.
That's right.
They want your ass in the restaurant every day,
6 days a week. That's right. And that's one of the reasons they haven't reopened up on Sundays, is because they're like, it's better for our employees because we want people who live there, is what he said without saying it. And for 600, if you put in $10,000 and you get 600,000 back, you don't quit. Their retention rate is 98% for store operators.
That's awesome.
It's unbelievable.
Hey, go stay on. I think you went through it a little too fast. I think there's a lesson there for any manager.
Yep.
So say that quote you said again. We focus on the customer experience by the experience we give behind the counter.
Oh, I can go into that again.
What did he say? So the experience in front of the counter is directly tied to the experience behind the counter?
The exact quote was, customer service in front of the counter is the same as the way you treat the customer behind the counter. And what he means by that is the way you treat a paying customer is going to be reflected on how the people that you pay will treat them. So if you hold yourself to a high standard with how you treat your employees are going, I care about you, the employee cares about Ian and compliments him on his car or his son with his baseball game and asks a question. Like, Ian, have you ever been on a phone call with like a telemarketer and they ask you, like, they're clearly from a different part of the world, and they ask you questions about yourself and they just are non-congruent and you're just like, please stop. Like, do you ever deal with that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Like when you walk into a Chick-fil-A, what I find fascinating is they usually will ask you something and it just feels like, wow, I feel like I was kind of transported to the 1950s.
And it's one of those pattern interrupters. Your brain kind of gets into a pattern of, I walk up to a register, someone greets me and says, hello, what can I get for you? And you expect that, right? You expect to walk up and say, I'll take a number 2 with a Diet Coke, right? Yep. You just get used to that. But then you walk up one day and they say, that hoodie is awesome. Is that cashmere? What is that? And it just makes you stop, like, what is this person asking me a question for? Right. Or those kind of things, just they're small, but they make a big difference. I think, Frankie, we did a whole episode on 10 reasons why your customer service sucks.
Yep.
Remember that episode? This was like a year and a half ago, I think.
Yeah.
But one of our big reasons on there was you treat your employees like shit. Because I think I just know from my experience of having customer experience be a big deal. You go and look at 20 offices in a company and they're all measured the same way on employee surveys. And one of them is significantly lower. Let's say the company average is 9.5 and one office is 7.5. I'm almost always willing to bet if I just went and spent a week there, it'd be a miserable morale. There would be there'd be low employee retention. People would just feel like working there. They wouldn't like it. And they don't even recognize they're doing it, but all of that, the customer feels the stress, the pressure, they feel miserable. You can just, it's the same, Frankie, have you ever talked to a salesperson where you could tell that they had too demanding of a boss? Like they had a boss that was almost threatening them with a gun to get the sale, where it's like they wouldn't lay off. They just were like a dog on a bone, just shaking you. And it's like, damn, you must have the worst boss ever. Leave me alone. Like, let me think about it.
So I'm going to go in a different direction with that. And it's this. The owner of Chick-fil-A is worth $7 billion.
Yeah.
$7 billion. He's clearly done okay.
For sure.
The owner invests $10,000 and they make $6. That's a really good return. $600,000, like that's under top 1% earner in the US. Like that's the 99%. And you're slinging chicken sandwiches and you're really you're not creating anything. You're just providing a good experience. So the company is smart. They don't want anyone they're going to put you through your paces on the way in. If you're the right person, you're the right culture, they're going to interview the hell out of you. They retain 98% because people are genuinely liking being there. And if that's the top of the store, if that's that's the top of the funnel. If that's the top of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel feels completely different than a place that's owned by some owner that I've never seen before, like a McDonald's. Like I can't remember the last time I went to a McDonald's or a Wendy's or any of the other fast food type places, and I had a decent experience. And Chick-fil-A doesn't have a decent experience. It has an incredible experience. And I think it comes down to the fact that if you are generous as an owner and the person who like you pay people well, you'll get good people who will stay, and it can work its way through the system where you're going to have really, really, really good results, and it's going to feel so different. And it's like we talked about a minute ago. Nobody wants to coach the Houston Texans because they fired 2 coaches in their first year. It's a bad culture.
It's a broken ownership.
Culture.
The top, it's the old crap flows downhill. If you got a problem owner, he's going to be a problem with his direct reports, and they're going to be miserable, and they're going to be a problem with their direct reports. It's really hard to overcome that at the top. It's almost like it's those old the champagne pyramids, right? If you pour good stuff in the top, the people at the very bottom cups are going to get great champagne. If you pour in Mad Dog 2020, you're going to get some booze at the bottom. It all flows straight down from that. One other story on owners. I got one story on this. I was one of the biggest power users in Fairfax ever when I worked at MVR, because every meeting I ever did, we would order multiple platters. That was one of the benefits of being an executive is I got to expense the lunch. So I always made sure it was Chick-fil-A. But this Fairfax, I didn't even know it. They knew us. They knew Mathews, every order, because it was always my credit card. And one time they forgot to bring us waffle fries. And, I didn't call. I was running the meeting, but I'm like, where's the waffle fries? And one of our managers called and complained, you guys forgot the waffle fries. The friggin' owner showed up the next day asking for me, came, brought me his card, shook my hand and said, I wanted to say, I'm sorry. You're one of our best customers and you have been for years. And we literally had been for years. We would order from there at least once a week, huge ass platters for 30 people. Came, shook my hand, said, I'm really sorry. And I remember thinking, there is no friggin' way a Papa John's owner, a McDonald's owner, a Burger King. I don't even know who owns those places, but this dude rolled up in his Chick-fil-A polo and shook my hand and said, "I'm sorry."
When we were at for your dad's funeral, like how much do you think? I don't even remember. How much do you think I spent on Chick-fil-A? $300,
Yeah,
$250.
$300. A lot of Chick-fil-A. A lot of chicken.
The manager came out and shook my hand, and everybody called me Mr. Cava. Like, place I've never been, I'll never go to again. Lee, and I thought the experience was so great, and I thought the chicken was so damn good. I actually went there the next day before I went to the airport. I'm like, that was a really good sandwich. I'm going there again.
Attaboy.
Driving up my numbers.
There would have been some extra nuggets left, but I ate 47 of them myself.
That's right. So let's talk a little bit about this. This is really neat. The chairman of the board, the man I saw speak, he talked about his culture, which follows in behind hiring. And I thought this was really interesting. He learned something years ago where somebody, I think it was Peter Drucker, started every meeting with a mistake he made the week before. So every Monday meeting, he would talk about the mistake he made, what happened, what were the results, what he learned. And he built a culture with this company that they embrace mistakes, and you don't get penalized or crucified for mistakes. If they're honest mistakes, you don't get repeated. And he said what it does with people is it builds an insatiable sense of curiosity. People are willing to try new things and are willing to expand and grow and ask great questions because they're not afraid of failing. And if the person up front is not afraid of failing and is honest about it, people are really, really, really interested in that. It creates, we talked about the top-down management, it creates a really comfortable environment for people to have ideas.
Man, Frankie, that is awesome. We just did the episode on football on the creative offensive coordinator who did all these fantastic plays that were really risky. And what did we talk about? We talked about he obviously works for a boss who does not condemn when people make mistakes with good intentions. I love that. I love starting a meeting with a mistake you made as the boss. There's something powerful about being vulnerable as the boss, taking the veneer off and just saying, I'm vulnerable, I make mistakes all the time. Now it's safe for all of you. That's just good model behavior.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about being ahead. First of all, their logo. That little logo, that little chicken with the beak.
Yeah.
Guess how much that cost to have a marketing company do it?
A couple $100.
$75.
Okay.
If you're a fan of Mad Men, which I am, he literally, McCann Erickson's ultimately who buys out Don Draper's firm. He goes, well, I wish McCann would send me bills for $75 now, which I'm guessing it's significantly more. So being ahead is big. That logo was pretty cool. Like, I don't know if you know this, but the CBS logo was literally built in the 40s. They've never really changed it because it was so ahead. It was an eyeball. It's still really cool today, and it goes across multiple medias that you're going to see. Their logo is great. Their logo has really not changed in 70 years because they got.
For the record, we spent triple on our Let Me Speak to a Manager podcast as Chick-fil-A did on their worldwide recognized brand. Just FYI. But that's inflation, Frankie.
For sure. They got more for that $75 than we
did. They also hire an amusement park artist out of Kentucky that they found on Upwork like we did to get their logo completed? Did you dig into that?
So their digital footprint. They looked at their digital footprint in around 2017 and they weren't happy with it. They thought the world was going to cell phones and technology, and nobody really had a digital footprint on the fast food side. So they built it. They finished it in 2019, right in time for the pandemic. And they were the first ones to have it. Their sales didn't dip at all in COVID, and even though they were closed for a period of time, because they built a digital footprint ahead of time. And what he talked about was being ahead. And he used the famous Wayne Gretzky, don't go where you can't go where the puck is. You got to go where the puck is going. And that's it. He goes, when the rate of this is an incredible quote. When the rate of external change is greater than the rate of internal change, then disaster is coming. You must be a champion of change and innovation.
Where's the first place you can remember downloading an app for a restaurant?
Do you have an answer? I'll think about it.
I know mine. I know my three. So my first one was Domino's. They were years ahead of Chick-fil-A. Domino's was like 2017. They had an app where you could see your pizza went in the oven. It was really, really ahead of anyone else. I remember thinking at the time too, like, the hell do I need an app for? You call, you order your pizza, 15 minutes there. Once I had it, I'm like, this is amazing. Second one was Starbucks that I downloaded. because I just wanted to get through the line faster and I liked it always being ready. And the third one was Chick-fil-A. Those are the first three that I could do. And I remember I lived at Chick-fil-A during COVID, that we ate there every single day after we'd go play baseball lunch, and we'd go to Chick-fil-A after, and I would always use the mobile app, and it got me through really fast. I loved it.
So it saved them. So I want to go back to that quote though. When the rate of external change is greater than the rate of internal change, and disaster is coming, you must be a champion of innovation. Isn't that an incredible quote?
Love it.
Great quote. So let's go through this. I think this is fascinating. I mean, I think all this is great, but portable versus in-store. So before the pandemic, they have it cost them well over $4 million to build their buildings, and their footprint is pretty big. Like they have a fairly large dining room.
That's why I thought, see, when you said commitment with operators and you asked me how much they had to put in, I was thinking they would want skin in the game. They'd want someone with some assets. So I was thinking $1 million. They'd have to go in on the land, the operation, but to go in for 10 grand, that's insane. Because I know how expensive those properties are. You and I could go buy a Chick-fil-A property. The problem is the returns are there'd be like a 3% cap rate on it, like a Starbucks. But it's just, I'm still blown away that it's only $10,000 to get in.
So in store before the I'm gonna do this before and after the pandemic. Any guess on inside dining before the pandemic versus drive-through before the pandemic?
Before the pandemic, I would say it was 60-40 inside or 50-50.
Nailed it. 60-40.
Okay. And then after, I would say it's like 10-90.
Nailed it.
Really?
Nailed it.
That's exactly it.
Exactly.
And they've not seen much of a return to in-store dining.
So he said this, he goes, look, this isn't my problem anymore because I'm the chairman, I'm not the CEO, but we spend a lot of money on that footprint. He goes, in some markets that are really busy, we're talking about, do we get rid of that dining room and do we put in a second or a third lane for drive-through? Like, what do we do with that space? How do we utilize it? Because it hasn't come back yet. And how do we innovate? Those are the things we're looking at. We have this incredible dining room with all this extra space. What do we do with it and how do we innovate?
And it's not just the drive-through, Frankie, why they in-store. It's they do delivery too through their app. You can get DoorDash. Like a lot of that has happened, but theirs is crazy. That 1090 is nuts.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Why don't I do two more? Yeah, let's do this. So he's a second generation owner. When he got there, they had under 200 stores. He took them to over 4,000. They were first in shopping malls. They caught a lot of crap for not opening on Sundays in shopping malls.
Oh, yeah.
Because the mall wanted someone there 7 days a week.
And it really isn't church. That's the whole.
He's a religious man, but that's not what he said.
It's to give people a day of rest.
That's what he said.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought it was church because they're super right-wing religious, but it wasn't. So he grew them by 2,000%. He said he's a really grounded guy. The woman before him speaking started a company that made cauliflower pizza crusts and now other things. And he sits down, he's like, this morning, he goes, I have 3 questions that I think you need to ask yourself. Who's your master? Who's your mate? And what's your mission? If you know those three things, who's your master? Who's your mate? And what's your mission? You're going to have an incredible life. And he goes, as an example of that, he kind of talked about physical fitness and how important that is to him. He's a former college and high school wrestler. He's like, look, I got a cauliflower ear. And the woman sitting next to him was like, they made this super weird face.
She didn't get the joke?
Not really. So he had the 3 questions about that. And he goes into this, and he goes into the 4 pillars of life. Mentally, you must always stay a student. You must be emotionally strong. You need to take care of yourself physically, and you need to take care of yourself spiritually. So those are the things that are at the top of this organization. Someone who's got peace within himself, knows his master, his mate, and his mission, and leads with the mistakes he makes, or humility is another way to say that. That's why that company, I think, feels the way that company feels.
Man, that's cool. And I'm sure he just treats, him and his CEO, that's not with a guy like that, and I've been eating at Chick-fil-A now for 15, 20 years, and it's so consistent that like a lot of CEOs get up and they say stuff on stage, what their pillars are. But I could tell you just from my experience,
He's living it.
He lives that, because that stuff filters all the way down to the front line people that are taking your order and smiling at you or not. And I can just sense, I've never met the guy, but that none of that is bullshit. That's how that company runs.
It feels it for sure. So we'll get you out of here on a couple of these, right? So we talked a little bit about their philosophy and why they're closed on Sundays. He talked a little bit about messaging, and he talked a little bit more about why. And he said this when it came down to the why: he who refreshes will be refreshed. He believes that's what the essence of what humanity needs. And he also said this, Ian: the handshake of the host affects the taste of the roast. So all of these things are very much in line with what we talked about.
I really like that. That's like the nice warm greeting, the smile, the everything they do. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
And what was the one? He who refreshes
will be refreshed.
So does that mean we should just keep drinking lots of wine?
As Jerry Seinfeld says, if you feel dehydrated, it's too late.
Frank, what do you do? What do you do to recharge yourself spiritually?
I talk to you every Wednesday at 10 a.m.
Is this a spiritual experience for you?
There is no doubt.
So
let's wrap it up.
There's sandwiches in my sandwich shop down. I had a Reuben today. It was a spiritual experience for me. It was like out of body. It was so good.
So here we go. Biggest lessons I took away were this. There's basically two. If something is going to be scaled, it must have good DNA. You can't scale bad DNA. And I think I started to tell you this story. I don't know where I said it. I'll just tell it now. The example he gave was this. They had 3 stores in South Africa, and those 3 stores were not performing well. Their labor costs were really low because South Africa was coming out of a civil war, and people were just desperate to get jobs. So they had no problem filling the jobs, and the labor cost was low, but there wasn't enough money in the economy, and they couldn't get the sales. And because they couldn't get the sales, he looked at it and goes, we got 40 places ready to go. He goes, we're not going to do that. These 3 told us we shouldn't scale. And you and I talked about a business decision that I'm not ready to say it publicly that I'm going to make. I just don't think you can scale bad DNA. I learned it this past weekend, and you asked me, like, did I get my 18 grand worth? I'm going to save 75, 80 grand a month by learning the lesson this past weekend. You can't scale bad DNA.
That one line hit you in the stomach. It hit you like a gut punch, and you said, okay, I'm going to go make a big change.
That's right. Because you can't scale bad DNA. It's a wonderful takeaway. And the last lesson is this. He goes in food services, and he kind of stops and chuckles. He goes, frankly, anywhere. When the CFO takes over for the founder or the CEO, sell the stock.
Holy.
With the exception of NVR.
That would have been a bad move at our old company.
With the exception of NVR, that is a really, really good piece of news.
But I'll tell you, that is pretty close, because I can tell you I was at GE when all of the business units started getting replaced. They started taking the engineers or the operators, the sales guys out, and it was all the finance weenies, the big audit staff, the corporate audit staff with all the brilliant MBA finance. They started running the businesses, and they all went to because none of those guys were willing to go roll their sleeves up and get into the actual businesses and know what was happening. I love that line. That's fantastic.
It's a great line. And I will tell you this, we're big fans of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger on this show. And one of the things they always say is we don't invest in miracles. I think the CEO, now he's the chairman of the board, but the former CEO of our old company, he was a miracle worker. He was an anomaly. He wasn't one of the quants that just turned into Quantville. He ran a better business, and it was insanely great. But typically that's right. So I think this is the perfect way to end. Do you know where the word Chick-fil-A came from?
No, I would love to.
All right. So I thought this would be a fun way to end. So in the 1940s, which was long since before we were born or even our dads were born, they didn't have chicken sandwiches. They didn't exist. And you know why they didn't have a chicken sandwich back then? Like it doesn't make any sense today, but you know why?
No.
Because back then it had bones in it. They didn't know how to debone it. So in the old days, you couldn't debone because it's a process that requires manufacturing and now it's industrialized, but it takes like a really skilled person with a knife to debone the chicken. So they didn't have chicken sandwiches because it would just be all soggy. It was a mess because of the bone. So his mother figured out how to debone it and deep fry it. And they call it Chick-fil-A because it's chicken. The deboned chicken breast was the fillet of chicken at the time, and it was A-graded. Chick-fil-A.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. I have one last thing. Did he get into anything with the marketing? Because I think Chick-fil-A is a brilliant marketing company with the whole eat more chicken with the cows. Did he get into any of that?
He did briefly.
That's one of the longest running campaigns, and it's still brilliant.
So when someone asked about that, he kind of joked. And the only thing he really said about it is, number one, McCann did that ad series, and they charged a fortune. It's incredibly successful. He mentioned that. And he said, I do hear from school teachers a lot that wish we had more literate cows. That's basically all he said.
That's all I gave you. We paid an ad agency and they were expensive, and it's a good one.
Yeah.
That's awesome. These are great takeaways. I love this. This is fantastic.
And you and I are going to deal with this later, but I've got 20 pages of notes.
And if you love Chick-fil-A as much as Ian Mathews, and Frank is now becoming a fanboy on my level now that he's met the CEO.
I'm
just
big time bitter that you eat so much fast food and you're so much skinnier than me.
You're just so Frank, I need you to get into this. Those boys they're growing. You're gonna need to get into the Chick-fil-A after baseball games. You're gonna be doing it. But if you love Chick-fil-A like I do, share this episode with someone. And if you are just creeping on us and you haven't subscribed, mash that subscribe button, and don't forget to give us a nice review on Apple Podcasts. Frankie, good hanging out with you. I am hungry, and there's a Chick-fil-A within 4 blocks of my office. A big reason why I chose this office. I'm heading there right now.
Don't forget to use the app.
You know I will. See you, bro.
See you, brother.